Okay, so our topic for today is responsible parenting. And so I thought I'd start with my top 5 parenting one-liners, just for a bit of fun. Top 5 parenting one-liners. So number 1, good parenting lies somewhere between don't do that and whatever. Number 2, when first child eats dirt, parents call the doctor. When the second child eats dirt, parents wash the mouth out. When the third child eats dirt, parents wonder if they even need to feed them lunch that day. Number 3, having a 2-year-old in the house is like owning a blender without a lid. Number 4, if you're having trouble getting your kids' attention, just try using the bathroom, making a phone call, lying down on the couch, or opening a chocolate bar. Get their attention right away. And number 5, everyone is an expert on parenting until you become one. All right, so this is the next in our topical series for term 2. We're looking at some hot button issues in our present cultural moment. Now, by hot button, I mean those kind of issues that either attract a lot of attention or have a lot of dissenting voices in our society today. And let me tell you, with the invention of social media, there are even more parenting experts out there, aren't there not? By expert, I mean really rude and judgmental people. And so, look, the first thing I want to say today is that this sermon is not designed to be judgmental. All right, the last time I preached on this topic, it was 12 years ago, believe it or not. It was back in 2012 at this church. And I still remember it vividly. And the reason I remember it vividly is because a whole bunch of people came up to me after the sermon and they were lamenting how they hadn't done many of the things I'd spoken about in the sermon, and now their kids had grown up and it was too late. And so the first thing I want to say today is, if I mention something that you haven't done as a parent, please understand there is no judgment, either from me or from God. All right? Now, having said that, God will judge an abusive or neglectful parent. Don't be that kind of parent. But if you are doing your best to be a parent, there's no judgment, okay? No judgment. Remember, everyone is an expert on parenting until you become one. And then when you become one, you realize parenting is mostly just making it up as you go along. All right, second thing I want to say today is that most of what I'm speaking about today has a wider application than just parenting. Now, yes, some of my material today is specifically aimed at raising small children or teenage children, but much of what I'm saying today translates to most relationships. The reason being that little kids are just mini versions of real people, aren't they? And so my prayer is we're all going to get something out of today, whether you're a parent or not. Third thing I want to say is that this sermon is going to be mostly application, all right, a lot of application today. And what I'm looking at is my top 5 parenting tips to be a responsible parent. But these tips are all straight from the Bible. And they come under a verse that wasn't actually read for us. We're sort of spending a lot of time in Proverbs this term. But this verse is from Ephesians 6, verse 4. Let me read to you Ephesians 6, 4. Do not exasperate your children. Instead, bring them up in the training and instruction of the Lord. And that's what all my 5 points today are building towards, all right? How to bring our children up in the training and instruction of the Lord. And I've got 5 points. You can see it on your inside of your news sheet. They are discipline, number 1, engagement, training, instruction, and godliness. And in my experience, the more I apply these principles to my parenting, the more my kids thrive and benefit. The more I ignore these principles, now whether that's through laziness or selfishness, the more my kids suffer. And look, while I've got a whopping 5 points today, you don't often get 5-point sermons from me, I still can't cover it all in 25 minutes, so there'll be a question time at the end if you have any other questions. But so now let's dive in and look at responsible parenting. And the first tip I have today is discipline. Now, this is a highly controversial topic in Western culture, okay? The sermon that I've received the strongest feedback from, the strongest pushback, I should say, in all my sermons, the one that I got the most pushback was one in which I mentioned a physical form of discipline for children. There were some people that did not like that. So there are some very strong ideas in our society today on discipline. So what does the Bible say? Well, if you've got Proverbs 23 open there, I'm going to read verses 13 and 14. What does it say? Do not withhold discipline from a child. If you punish them with the rod, they will not die. Punish them with the rod and save them from death. Now, this passage is not saying that all discipline should be physical. All right, there are various ways you can discipline your child, but it's simply warning against that notion that you should never discipline a child, which is gaining more and more traction in our society today. And in spite of those voices, all the data supports this verse. All right, now experts break parenting down into 4 parenting styles. It's going to come up behind me now. These are the 4 parenting styles that experts are talking about. There's authoritarian, there's permissive, there's uninvolved, and there's authoritative. Now, what do these all 4 mean? I'll go through them quickly. So an authoritarian parent is a person who sets out strict rules for their kids with no explanation. All right? When questioned, the parents will generally say something like, "Because I said so." And if failure, when there is failure to adhere to those rules, strict punishment ensues. So that's authoritarian. Permissive parenting has very few rules or demands. All right, children are rarely disciplined, and the discipline they do receive is usually inconsistent. These parents are more responsive and nurturing, and they want to build a close relationship. They want to be friends with their kids. Uninvolved parenting or neglectful parenting is just that. Little to no guidance or support is offered, as is little to no discipline. And then you've got authoritative parenting. Now, in authoritative parenting, the rules are set out, just like the authoritarian parenting, but these boundaries are explained to the children. Right? The reason you can't play on the road is because you might get hit by a car, okay? And if children step out of line, they are punished, but that punishment is explained in such a way that the child realizes it is for their own good. Now, each of these 4 parenting styles produce different children. And here's what all the research shows. Authoritarian parenting produces children who rank lower in happiness, social competence, and self-esteem. They are more obedient and proficient, but that's because they tend to associate obedience and success with love. They are often aggressive outside the home. These are the kids that become the school bullies, all right? And they never learn how to set their own personal standards in life because they've always just been told what to do by their parents. Permissive parenting produces children who lack self-discipline, are deeply self-involved, and are very demanding. Now, they may have better interpersonal skills, but they are 3 times more likely to engage in heavy drinking, are less academically motivated, and lack the ability to share. They always just get their own way. They also grow with a lack of respect. Well, they grow up to have a lack of respect for authority figures such as teachers or the police. These are often the ones that are in jail. Uninvolved parenting produces children who have trouble developing emotional connections with people, and they have less social skills and less coping mechanisms. Authoritative parenting generally produces children who have a happy demeanour, have good emotional control, good social skills, and are better at learning new skills. Right? These kids learn that they can act independently and accomplish things on their own, and that leads to good self-esteem. So in short, authoritative parenting, right, that's parenting that sets boundaries, explains the boundaries, and enforces the boundaries. This produces the most successful kids, all right? It is the healthy line to tread, the healthy balance between provoking your kid, all right, exasperating your kid on the one hand, that's what authoritarian parents do, or producing very insecure kids with no boundaries, that's what permissive or uninvolved parents do. All right? Do not withhold discipline from a child. If you punish them with the rod, they're not going to die. You'll actually save their life. All right, thanks, Louise. Second parenting tip for today is bring your children up. This is how you bring your children up in the training and instruction of the Lord. You need to engage with your kids. All right? You need to spend time hanging out with your kids. You need to spend time chatting with your kids. You need to build a relationship with them. All right? In order to be able to train and instruct your kids in the Lord. Now, that's our third, fourth and fifth point for today. But before we get to that, you need to be engaged in their lives. So arguably the best bit of parenting advice I ever got was from a video clip I stumbled across many years ago from Ray Galea. Now, Ray Galea is a minister here from here in Sydney, an Anglican minister here. And in this video, he said one of the best things he ever did as a father was he would spend 1 hour every week one-on-one with each of his kids. And his kids could do whatever they wanted with him. They could go shopping, they could play video games, whatever, so long as he got 20 minutes to just sit and chat with them. And he said that hour each week meant that he had a great relationship with his kids, even through their teenage years. Right? In the video, he said his 22-year-old, he's probably more like 40 now, but he said his 22-year-old still looked forward to that hour a week. And I still remember the day that I introduced this as a parent. So this was about 2 weeks into Logan being at kindergarten. All right, and I picked him up on a Monday afternoon and I told him, all right, from here on in, buddy, you and I are going to spend 1 hour a week each week, just you and me. And tears started welling up in his eyes. I don't mean to embarrass the poor guy. And he turned around and he gave me a big hug. That moment has never left me. All right? He was overjoyed because that gesture showed him that I loved him. Now, as the rest of my kids started to enter school, I found that I couldn't actually spend a whole hour with all of them every week, all right? But I still regularly take all my kids out. We go down to Adora's. We either have a milkshake or a hot chocolate, and we just chat. It's called Daddy Time, all right? And what Daddy Time has meant is that my kids feel comfortable talking to me about anything. Well, almost anything. I mean, it's probably almost anything. But anyway, it has been a great thing to do, right? Bringing your children up in the training and instruction of the Lord means you need to be engaged in their lives. Now, that takes time, and it's best to start early, all right? But it is totally worth it. Okay, third parenting tip. Do not fix all your kids' problems. Instead, help them to fix them. All right, so this is Proverbs 22, verse 6. Where are we? 22, verse 6, down the bottom. Start children off in the way they should go, and even when they are old, they will not turn from it. Now, there was a term coined a couple of years ago. It's called bulldozer parenting. Has anyone heard of bulldozer parenting? In the States, it's called snowplow parenting. All right, but most Aussies have never even seen snow, so we call it bulldozer parenting. And what a bulldozer parent does is they run interference for their kids and push all the obstacles out of their way so their kids have a nice, easy life growing up. So here's an example. If their child gets a B on their report card, parents straight on the phone, rousing on the teacher until the teacher gives their kid an A. All right, we don't want to hurt our kids' feelings by giving them a B on their report card. Now, the problem with bulldozer parenting is it fails to prepare that child to actually deal with the real world. All right, when that child gets to uni or out in the workforce, mummy can't rouse on the lecturer to say, you will give my kid an A for his mediocre work. And mummy can't ring up the boss and say, hey, you need to go easy on my child. Doesn't work that way. Bulldozer parenting raises kids who have no skills to be able to navigate real life. Instead, train the child in the way they should go. All right, Proverbs 22:6. So I'll give you an example. I was having daddy time with one of my kids. They're going to remain nameless for this one. I don't usually use my kids as sermon illustrations as a general rule, but parenting, what can you do? But anyway, I asked this child, how was school? And he said, oh, it's okay. And I went, oh, that's new. What's going on? Is someone picking on you? And they said, yeah, there's this girl who keeps picking on me. She's always tugging on my bag or trying to trip me over in the hallway. And she actually tripped me over the other day and everyone laughed at me. And I said, oh. And so I started talking to him about it. I said, well, why do you think she's picking on you? And he said, well, I don't know. It's probably because she doesn't like me. And I said, well, actually, Tiger, it's the opposite. He's like, what? I said, when a little boy picks on a little girl or a little girl picks on a little boy, actually it's because they do like them. They just lack the emotional ability to be able to express that. But I said, it's still not nice, is it? He goes, no. I said, so what are we going to do about it? And he said, I don't know. And I said, well, how about you try this? Next time she does something like that, say to her in front of everyone, listen, Maria, or whatever your name is, you're a lovely girl, but I just don't like you that way. Now, what are you doing there? You're paying them a compliment. You're not hurting them, but you're adding just the right amount of embarrassment so that they'll probably stop looking for that kind of attention from you in future. Right? So what have I done there? I didn't run down to the school and talk to the principal and say, you will fix this, all right? I helped my kid to figure out how he can fix it himself. And so when he gets out in the big bad world and problems come at him, and they're going to, he'll at least have some skills to deal with those problems himself. All right, fourth parenting tip. Don't just be a teacher, be an instructor or a mentor, right? So bring them up in the teaching and instruction of the Lord. Now, what does it mean? There's a difference between a teacher and a mentor, right? So a teacher stands up the front and tells you what to do, gives you skills, gives you information, gives you education. A mentor walks alongside you in life, right? Helps you make good choices in life. So this is what Proverbs 23:19-21 is talking about. What does it say? Listen, my son, and be wise, and set your heart on the right path. Do not join those who drink too much wine or gorge themselves on meat, for drunkards and gluttons become poor, and drowsiness clothes them in rags. So again, that's just an example, but what the author is encouraging their son is to get on the right path in life. Now, why is he encouraging his son in this, or she encouraging the son in this? It's because the wrong path leads to misery. Now, Jordan Peterson calls this being a proxy for the world with your child. All right, he says, be a proxy for the world with your child. Why? What he says is, don't let your child do things that will make you dislike them. That's what being a proxy is. Don't let your child do things that will make you dislike them. Now, why is that? It's because if you dislike them as their parent, then the world is going to hate them for that kind of behavior, isn't it? And that leads to a very lonely and miserable life. All right, be a proxy for the world with your child. So take little kids, for example. People love seeing nice, sweet, well-behaved children, do they not? Before my kids were at school, I used to take them out on my day off. So Deb would go to work and I'd have my day off and I'd look after the kids, and I'd take them out, to a park or to a shopping centre or a cafe, keep them occupied. And when they were out, if they were well-behaved, they used to get free food, right? Like I'd go to a kebab shop, I'd order a kebab for myself and a mini kebab for one of my kids, and they'd say, oh, no charge for your kid. Like they would get chocolates when we'd go to Adora sometimes, or lollies when we go out elsewhere, if they were well behaved, all right? It was kind of embarrassing sometimes, the amount of stuff that they would get thrown at my kids. But compare that with a ratbag kid who's noisy and disrespectful, all right, who chucks hissy fits when they don't get their way. That kind of kid's getting nothing, are they? But what is worse is that kid may very well grow up thinking that's how you behave in the real world. I'm allowed to be noisy and obnoxious. I've always got away with it. Well, yeah, with your parents who have to love you, but I don't. Neither does anyone else. All right, and those kids grow up to be very lonely and very miserable. Who would want to hang out with such an obnoxious adult? All right, so be a proxy for the world with your child. Another way you can instruct your children is regarding screens. Now, as a parent, I get it. All right, sometimes you just want peace and quiet. And so giving your 3-year-old a screen for an hour or two so you can have some peace and quiet is very relaxing. It's like, oh, I just need this. But we need to understand that comes at a huge cost. Right? I walked into a clothes shop a few weeks back, and the sales assistant was sitting on the couch scrolling through her phone. And she looked up at me and said, "Can I help you with anything?" I said, "No, thanks, I'm just looking." Straight back to her phone. Right? And this is a hot tip for young people looking for a job. Even if you're not busy, you need to look busy. But that's one example of how screens are making our kids unemployable these days. Simon Sinek, he's a leadership guru. He says we've lost the ability to interact with real people these days. He says when you have a departmental meeting, everyone comes into the meeting room, and before the meeting, they're all sitting around the table looking at their screens, all right? Rather than actually engaging with the real person that they work with across the table. And he says Gen Y and Gen Z need mentoring in these issues. So that's what we need to do as parents. Get alongside your kids and instruct them in real life. All right, fifth and final parenting tip. Ephesians 6:4. Do not exasperate your children. Do not overburden your children. Instead, bring them up in the training and instruction of the Lord. Very important, of the Lord. All right. So last month, we preached through the first half of the armour of God. We've got the second half coming up in a couple of weeks. This is from Ephesians 6. And the first piece of that armour was the belt of truth. All right. And for those who were here, the belt is the one piece of armour that is neither an offensive or a defensive weapon. The belt is what soldiers would wear to prepare them for battle. So what they would do, they were wearing these long robes, they would roll the robes up and they would tuck them between their legs around the back, and then they would wrap them around the outside of their legs and tuck them into their belts. And what that gave them was full movement of their legs for battle. There's actually a phrase for it. It's called to gird your loins. Right? When you're tucking your robes in, you are girding your loins, ready to either run or work or get into battle. Now, Paul uses this military practice metaphorically to talk about being prepared for our spiritual battle, that is against the world, the flesh, and the devil. All right? And what he means is you are not even ready for battle as a Christian unless you first understand that the Bible is the infallible word of God. It's the belt of truth. All right? We need to understand that this book does not contain truth somewhere in it, and we have to go looking for the truth. Everything it says is the truth. Now, why am I repeating myself here? It's because this is important. All right? I said this last month, and I'm going to say it again. Why do you think people like Jordan Peterson's views are so in line with the Bible? He's not a Christian. All right? His view of God, from what I can make out, he views God as some sort of impersonal force rather than a personal creator or savior. But whenever he does a deep dive on something, whether it be relationships or mental health, economics, politics, or parenting, all his research and his thinking and his asking around and looking at the data leads him to the exact same conclusion the Bible has been teaching for millennia. Like, how many times does the Bible have to be proved right through exhaustive analysis before people will realize this book is not a human book? It's a divine one. And unless we are searching this book and obeying it, we haven't yet girded our loins. We're not even ready for the spiritual battle. And that is the most important job as a parent. All right, I've kept the most important parenting tip till last. The way you raise your kids to be fully functioning and thriving adults in the world is to make sure that you are bringing them up in the training and instruction of the Lord. Right? Read your Bible with your kids. We read the Bible every night after dinner when we're sitting around the table as a family. Talk with your kids about Jesus. Don't just leave it up to your minister. Right? And don't ever make them think that your faith is a private matter, that you don't talk about. It's rubbish. And bring them to church every Sunday until they're old enough to make their own decision. All right? One of the biggest disservices that parents make with their kids is modeling for them that church is optional. It's not. All right? Help your kids to gird their loins for the battle that lies ahead. And even when they are old, they will not turn from it. So, that's my top 5 parenting tips from the Bible, right? Number 1, discipline. Proverbs 23:14, punish them with the rod and save them from death. Number 2, engagement. Takes time to raise your kids. Number 3, training. Number 4, instruction, all right? Teach them, but also mentor them. And number 5, do it under God's word. And if you are doing your best in those things, then you are on your way to being a responsible parent. So parents, do not exasperate your children. Instead, bring them up in the training and instruction of the Lord. Let's give you a few seconds and we'll see if there's any questions. We've got one right off the bat. Go, Scott. Yes? No. Yep. Special needs. Yep. Yeah, okay. Yeah. So Scott's question is very good. If you have a special needs child, does that change the game completely? Is it a whole new ball game? My personal opinion, so I've not experienced this personally, okay, but my initial take would be it is not a whole new ball game, in that in order to raise any kid equally, you need to raise that kid differently. So I have 4 kids. They have a lot of similarities because they were raised by Deb and I, but they've also got a lot of differences. And so in order to raise each of my kids fairly and equally, I sometimes have to treat them a little differently. And I would say that that is probably the case with special needs kids as well. I would say that the basic 5 tips that I gave today would apply for special needs kids, but you'll have to experiment with the recipe, if I can put it that way, or adjust, as Renzo said. So these are not hard and fast. These are the 5 things you must strictly follow, all right? They are parenting tips from the Bible. This is the basics of how you should do it. And if you have special needs kids, you're going to have to figure out what that looks like for them. So I'd say, yes, it's different, but it's not a whole new ball game. But yeah, great question. Thanks, Scott. David. Yep. Okay, so Dave's excellent question. Bad company corrupts good character. I don't know the exact verse, but that's the basic teaching of the Bible, and there's probably a proverb that I haven't committed to memory. And how much of how careful should we be in that? And I think it's very important to be making sure that your kids are at best keeping good company, because the proverb says, don't throw your lot in with a bunch of corrupt people, or they will ruin your life. They will basically ruin your life. And so I had, it was at a previous church of mine, there was a family whose teenage son, he was in year 7 or year 8, he got in with some really bad kids at school, and he was starting to go off the rails, and so they took him out of the public school and put him in a Christian school where he met some really good young Christian men, and he turned it around almost overnight, and he's become one of the most fine young Christian men I know. So he's in his 30s now, with kids, married with kids, and he's just an amazing guy. And so, but just putting them in a Christian school does not mean they're going to be with good characters. Like, you're lucky if 10% of Christian schools are filled with Christians, all right? So it's worthwhile just keeping an eye on who your kids are hanging out with, and you can't force them as they get older. Like I can't tell my 18-year-old you're not allowed to hang out with that person anymore, but I can encourage them, and particularly when they're kids, younger kids, you can guide them in. So I think that's a really important parenting tip. Yeah, thanks, David. Yes, Saskia. Good question. What is helicopter parenting? So helicopter parenting is similar to bulldozer parenting. So it's basically that the parents hang around to see what their kids need. And they're always hanging over their kids. What are you doing? What are you up to? Can I help with this? Don't do that. And so the kids feel very crowded. And it's similar to bulldozer parenting in that it's like, all right, what do you need, honey? I'll go get that for you. I'll fix that for you. I'll do that for you. And so it's just slightly different to helicopter parenting. But again, helicopter parenting alongside bulldozer parenting is you're not actually training your kids to deal with the real world themselves. And it leaves them really struggling when they get out in the real world. So yeah, great question. Thanks, Saskia. Go. Yep. Yep. Yeah. 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 So Pete's comment is we've got this magic age of 18 and you automatically become an adult straight after. But sometimes, look, you might have kids that are a bit more mature at 16 and 17. You might have kids that are a little less mature at 19 and 20. And parents, you have to, again, you have to adjust and figure that out. And you need to prepare your kids that they will be treated as an adult as soon as they turn 18. So one of the tips that I didn't mention today is it's another tip that I was given years ago, is prepare your kids for the next phase in their life. And so when my kids are about to go to high school, I started preparing them in year 5 and 6 to talk about high school and what high school is going to be like and try and take away the anxiety for high school. As they move into the next stage, all right, what's going to happen when you hit year 9 and 10? Or you're going to start to be interested in the opposite sex. What's that going to look like? And, when they're about to leave high school, what's that going to be like? And so, that's a good thing to do as well. It's like, well, 18 is the magical number from our government. How are you going to be ready for that? Yeah. Thanks, Peter. Saskia. Good question. Are there any good Christian books on parenting? Is the Bible the only source? So I would say yes, there are many good books on parenting. I don't know any off the top of my head. Does anyone know any good Christian books off the top of their head? Boundaries, is that a book? Yep. Yep. Okay, there you go, some boundary series. I do know of a book called Point Man, which is talking about fathers, teaching fathers to be good leaders of their whole family. That would include kids as well. Yeah, I would have to look into that, Saskia, but there are many, many good Christian books out there on how to be parents. You don't just need to stick to the Bible, yeah. But I'm sorry I don't have any off the top of my head. Like I've given some resources in the last couple of sermons, but I Yeah, just didn't write any down for this sermon, sorry. Anyone else? Oh, yes, Scott. Yeah.
How do you encourage your son and your daughter, your son or your daughter, when they start? That is when they make a decision and it turns out to be a disaster.
Yeah. How do you encourage your children when they make a decision and it turns out to be a disaster? And that's another excellent question. What I've done, and I actually had a similar conversation to this yesterday with two of my sons, just saying it's okay to fail. I've failed plenty of times, and so failure is a hard thing, particularly if you have a fear of failure and you work really hard to not fail, and when it actually happens, it's like, oh, my life is over. I don't mean to brag, but I've had a lot of experience with failure, and that makes it a little easier, all right? Don't berate you. So the first thing is prepare them. Second, don't berate them. Don't make them feel even worse. Just say, all right, buddy, or all right, honey, that was a mistake, and what can we learn from this? I'll give you a quick story. When my wife was in high school, she has a fear of failure, but she was on a school camp, and her and a couple of friends snuck out and got caught, and they had to ring the parents to come and get them, and her dad showed up, didn't say anything, got her in the car and handed her a little poster. And she still owns this poster for this day, and she unrolled it, and it's got like a kitten on it or something like that, and it says, "What would you have me learn from this, Lord?" And that was it. Never spoke about it again. And so I think that's a really good way to encourage them as well. It's like, look, you're going to have setbacks in life. Some will be from you, some will be not from you. What will you learn from this, and how we go on for the next time? Just make them know that the life is not over, and that you can use these opportunities to learn. That'd be my top 3 for that, yeah. Peter.
Speaking to EA, it's not exactly parenting for the under 18s. Parenting to kids for somewhere between 18 and
50. Doing Life with Your Adult Children by Jim Burns. All right, keep your mouth shut and the welcome mat out. Thank you for that. That's a good one. We've got time for another one or two. Ange? Wrong path. Yeah, okay. So Ange's question is, if you have, your family friends with a particular family and you've seen the child growing up, but you've just recently witnessed the child taking the wrong path, and maybe the parents don't see that, what do you do? So I think that's a very hard line to tread, and it will depend on a whole bunch of things, like how good of friends are you, and what evidence do you have for this? I think I'd just approach it like I'd approach most difficult conversations, and just be as gentle as you can, and don't come in and say you're stuffing up as a parent. Just say, I've noticed this or this. Can you, I'm just wondering what's going on. So just very gentle entry into that conversation. And I think the best way to sort of approach those kinds of things is, I'm just wondering what's going on. Can you share with me what's happening? Because I saw this, and I think that gives them an opportunity to say what they want to say without feeling attacked. You don't want them to feel judged or looked down upon, but you're giving them the opportunity to open up a dialogue in that way. And you might be able to give some advice here and there, but again, you've got to be very careful because people will take that as judgmentalism, and you don't want to do that. So, I would just broach it very gently and carefully. And prayer is always a really good avenue as well. Just pray for those children because, they will quite often come around. Just pray for that and be there for when they do. Yeah. Saskia. Yeah. So Saskia's question is, how do you help a child of any age, and that could be up to 40 or 50, how can you help your child of any age who is dealing with difficult people or bullies? And so I think the 2 or 3 things you need to do is you need to tell that child of any age that kind of behaviour is not okay, and that them being pushed around or oppressed or persecuted or teased is not acceptable behaviour. And sometimes people need to hear that. Sometimes people just think that's just normal or I deserve it, and you don't. You don't deserve it. You should not be putting up with that. That's step 1. Step 2 is assertiveness training, and a lot of people need that. They need to be able to receive training in actually standing up for themselves. All right, that doesn't come easy to everyone. Some people need training in that. And number 3 is, even if that assertiveness training is not producing results, if you standing up for yourself is not producing results because your boss or whoever it is continues to really pick on you and tease you or bully you, then you help them figure out, well, what's the next decision? Do I need to change jobs or move where I'm currently at in life? And you can help them through that. I'll just ask our resident psychologist, Deb, would you add to that? Yeah, good. I didn't say anything terribly wrong. Phew. Thanks, Deb. All right, one more. Yes, Benny. Yeah. Yeah, building a connection. Yeah. Yeah, that's another great. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, so Benny's made a good point there, is that if someone is bullying someone else, there's usually something going on under the surface. And that's why I said the authoritarian parents often produce bullies. All right? Now, why is that? It's because the kids have no power at home. And so they want to get power, they go elsewhere and they try and get it in the schoolyard. And so there's a lot of psychology going on under the surface there. And so, when I was helping I haven't only helped one kid deal with bullying. I've helped, a couple of kids deal with people at school who are doing things that are not enjoyable. And the idea is you don't want to crush this person. You don't want to hurt this person, all right? We're Christians. We want to show love. but we want to do it in such a way that it changes the situation. And so you've given a good example of actually sitting down and saying, hey, what's going on? What you're doing is making me feel this way. I would really like it if they could stop, please. And like you said, give them a chocolate so it shows that you care. That is another really good avenue. And look, there you go. You've done it. You've helped your kid build some skills to be able to deal with the real world. A great idea. Yeah, great. Chocolate fixes everything. All right. Well, that's all we've got time for now. We can talk more over morning tea, but we're going to sing now and sing praises to our great Heavenly Father that has shown us the kind of love we need. Oh, praise the name. Let's stand and sing.